Before I explain anything, let me tell you this. If you're a doctor working in the UK right now, your pathway to permanent settlement is about to change dramatically. And if you don't understand what's coming, you could be facing 10 years instead of 5. Or if you're in certain roles, even 15 years before you can settle. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what the November 2025 earned settlement proposal means for you. We're going to cover 5 critical topics that will determine your future in the UK. First, how NHS doctors can potentially keep their 5-year pathway through public service reductions. Second, how consultant-grade doctors earning over £125,140 might actually settle in just 3 years, faster than the current system. Third, the dramatic change for your spouse and children, who will no longer automatically settle with you. Fourth, why healthcare workers in certain roles below degree level could be facing 15 years instead of 5. And fifth, the shocking proposal that even after getting settled status, you might not be able to access benefits until you become a British citizen. But here's what matters most right now. These changes are proposed to apply to everyone already in the UK who hasn't received settled status yet. That means if you're currently on year 2 or 3 of your 5-year pathway, you could suddenly find yourself needing to meet completely new requirements. The consultation closes on February 12, 2026, and what happens in the next few months will determine the future for hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand, what reductions you qualify for, and what actions you need to take right now. Let's get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to this important discussion about the UK government's newly published earned settlement proposal from November 2025. I'm here to break down what this means specifically for doctors and healthcare professionals working in the UK. This is a major shift in immigration policy that will affect hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers currently on the pathway to settlement. So let's dive straight into what matters most to you. Okay, let's understand the basics. Let me start by explaining the most crucial part, Table 2 from the consultation document. This table shows how you can actually reduce your time to settlement from the new baseline of 10 years. Currently, most doctors can settle after 5 years. Under the new proposal, the baseline becomes 10 years. However, here's the good news. You can earn reductions based on specific criteria. First, if you have competency in English at C1 level, you get -1 year. Second, if you earn a taxable income of £125,140 for 3 years immediately prior to applying for settlement, you get -7 years. Third, if you earn a taxable income of £50,270 for 3 years immediately prior to applying, you get -5 years. Fourth, if you've been employed in a specified public service occupation for 5 years, you get -5 years. And importantly for doctors, if you hold permission as the partner, parent, or child of a British citizen and meet core family requirements, you get -5 years, meaning you can still settle in 5 years. Now let me explain what this means in practical terms for different categories of doctors. For resident doctors and junior doctors. Let's start with resident doctors and junior doctors, which is likely many of you watching. Under the mandatory requirements, you must be able to evidence that you meet English language requirements at B2 level, pass the Life in the UK test, and have contributed to the Exchequer by having annual earnings above £12,570 for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. Now, as a junior doctor, your salary typically ranges from around 32,000 to 63,000 depending on your training year. Let me break down your pathway. If you're earning below £50,270, which includes most foundation doctors and many specialty trainees in their early years, you would not qualify for the income-based reduction. This means your settlement pathway would be 10 years by default. However, here's the key provision that applies to you. The government is consulting on whether there should be a similarly shorter pathway to settlement for those working in vital public services, particularly where earnings are based on national pay scales. This might include medical professionals working in public services. It is envisaged that this reduction in the qualifying period for public service roles would apply only to those working in skilled occupations at RQF level 6 or above. As doctors, you definitely meet this requirement. If you've been employed in a specified public service occupation for 5 years, you could get minus 5 years, bringing your total back down to 5 years. So in practical terms, if you're an NHS doctor, there's a strong possibility you'll retain the 5-year pathway to settlement, though this is subject to consultation. Now let's talk about consultant grade doctors and senior medical professionals. If you're a consultant, your salary typically ranges from around £93,000 to over £130,000. This puts many of you in a very favorable position. If you earn £125,140 or above for 3 years immediately prior to applying, you get a 7-year reduction. This means you could potentially settle in just 3 years from the 10-year baseline. If you earn between £50,270 and £125,140, you get a 5-year reduction, meaning you could settle in 5 years. Additionally, if you're working in the NHS for 5 years, you may qualify for the public service reduction of 5 years. The document states that the government's view is that arrangements for settlement should reward those who are making the greatest contribution, and that earnings are the best means of objectively measuring economic contribution. So for consultants, you're actually in a better position than under the current system if you meet the income thresholds. However, remember you need to maintain these earnings for 3 years before applying. Doctors working in private sector. This is crucial information if you're working in private practice. The income-based reductions apply regardless of whether you're in public or private sector. If you earn £50,270 or above for 3 years, you qualify for a 5-year reduction. And if you earn £125,140 or above, you get a 7-year reduction. However, you will not qualify for the public service occupation reduction. This reduction is specifically for those working in vital public services where earnings are based on national pay scales, and it's envisaged that this would apply only to those working in skilled occupations in public services. So if you're in private practice and earning good money, you can use the income-based pathway. If you're earning below £50,270 in private practice, you would face the full 10-year pathway, unless you meet other criteria like being married to a British citizen. The government is clearly trying to incentivize work in public services while still allowing high earners in the private sector to settle relatively quickly. What about your dependents? Now let's talk about what this means for your family, your spouse and children. This is where things get more complicated and frankly less favorable. Currently, most dependent partners of migrants can settle at the same time as the main applicant without meeting any additional conditions. Under the proposed reforms, dependent partners will have their own qualifying period based on their individual circumstances. This is a fundamental change. Your spouse will no longer automatically settle when you do. For children, it is recognized that they cannot meet certain requirements under the earned settlement proposals, such as national insurance contributions. The Home Office intends to keep a window for those admitted as dependents under 18 to settle at the same time as their parents, while considering an age cutoff after which they would need to follow their own route. So what does this mean practically? If your spouse is not working or earning below the thresholds, they would face the full 10-year pathway. If they're working and earning above £50,270 for 3 years, they could get a 5-year reduction. Your children under 18 would likely still settle with you, but if they turn 18 during your qualifying period, they may need to qualify independently. However, there's one very important exception. If you hold permission as the partner of a British citizen and meet core family requirements, you get minus 5 years. So if your spouse is a British citizen, you can still settle in 5 years regardless of your income. For other healthcare professionals, let me now briefly address other healthcare workers, nurses, allied health professionals, and care workers. Between 2022 and 2024, 616,000 individuals arrived on health and care visas. Over half were not even arriving to work in that sector, but were instead dependents of those who were. Around half of health and care entry clearance visas issued to main applicants in 2022 were issued to senior care and care workers, rising to over 70% in 2023. Here's the critical provision. The government is consulting on whether a contribution-based approach should mean that the existing pathway for settlement is increased beyond the standard baseline of 10 years for those admitted to the UK, specifically to work in occupations skilled below RQF Level 6. This might involve increasing the baseline qualifying period to 15 years, where the worker has been sponsored for a role skilled below RQF Level 6, for example, under the skilled worker and health and care routes. Now, most registered nurses work at RQF Level 6, which is degree level. So, registered nurses should not face the 15-year pathway. However, 75% of skilled work visas on the health and care route were issued to occupations below RQF Level 6 in 2023, up from 11% in 2021. This includes senior care workers and care workers. If you're in this category, you could be facing a 15-year baseline pathway to settlement. However, if you work in a specified public service occupation for 5 years, you could still get a 5-year reduction, though it's unclear if care workers will be included in this category. For physiotherapists, occupational therapists, radiographers, and other allied health professionals working at degree level or above, you would be treated similarly to doctors, potentially qualifying for the public service reduction if you work in the NHS for 5 years. The mandatory requirements everyone must meet. Before we go further, let me emphasize the mandatory requirements that everyone must meet, regardless of reductions. You must meet suitability requirements, for example, not having a criminal conviction. You must have no current litigation, NHS, tax, or other government debt. You must evidence English language requirements at B2 level. You must pass the Life in the UK test. And you must have contributed to the Exchequer by having annual earnings above £12,570 for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. The government will conduct a root and branch review of the criminality thresholds. Their expectation is that you should not be able to settle with a criminal record. So even minor convictions could now prevent settlement entirely. This is a significant tightening. What could extend your pathway? Now let me explain Table 3, the considerations that will increase your baseline qualifying period. This is crucial because these take precedence over any reductions. If you've been in receipt of public funds for less than 12 months during your route to settlement, you face a plus 5 years penalty. If you've been in receipt of public funds for more than 12 months, you face a plus 10 years penalty. If you arrived in the UK illegally, for example via a small boat, you face plus up to 20 years. If you entered on a visit visa and then switched, plus up to 20 years. If you've overstayed a permission for 6 months or more, plus up to 20 years. Now, for most doctors who came on sponsored visas, these penalties won't apply. But if you ever claimed benefits during a period when you were allowed to, or if you overstayed at any point, this could significantly extend your pathway. The document emphasizes that these penalties would apply where it was judged that a breach should not lead to outright refusal, but would nevertheless cause the qualifying period for settlement to be increased. The big question: access to benefits after settlement. Here's something that will affect everyone once you do achieve settlement. The consultation seeks views on whether the law should be changed so that settlement could be made subject to a no recourse to public funds condition. This would have the effect of shifting the default position on access to benefits to citizenship rather than settlement. This means even after you get settled status, you might not be able to access benefits, universal credit, or social housing until you become a British citizen. This is a major change. Under this option, new migrants granted settlement would continue to be unable to access specified benefits in line with existing visa conditions. So settlement would no longer provide the same rights it does today. You'd need to progress to citizenship to access the full range of public benefits. Transitional arrangements. Will current residents be affected? This is probably the question on everyone's mind. If you're already in the UK on a pathway to settlement, will these changes affect you? The answer, I'm afraid, is yes. The Home Secretary states, crucially, for these and every other group mentioned here, we propose to apply these changes to everyone in the country today who has not already received indefinite leave to remain. This would mean that those who are due to reach settlement in the coming months and years would be subject to the new requirements for earned settlement as soon as immigration rules have changed. However, the government will not take away settled status from those who have already been granted it. These are people who have been in the country for years, even decades. They have families here, they have contributed to society. The consultation includes questions seeking views on whether there should be transitional arrangements for those already on a pathway to settlement. So there's still a possibility that transitional provisions could be introduced based on consultation responses. But as it stands, the proposal is to apply these changes to everyone who hasn't yet received indefinite leave to remain. Timeline and what happens next. Let me explain the timeline moving forward. This consultation will run for 12 weeks. It opened in November 2025. A paper summarizing the responses to this consultation alongside economic and equality impact assessments will be published in due course. After that, the government will introduce changes to the immigration rules. These don't require primary legislation for settlement changes, so they can be implemented relatively quickly through secondary legislation. The consultation questionnaire is available, and the government is particularly seeking views from those who will be affected. That includes all of you. This is your opportunity to make your voice heard. If you feel these changes are unfair, particularly regarding transitional arrangements, you need to respond to the consultation. My assessment and key takeaways. Let me summarize the key points for doctors. For NHS doctors working at any grade, you will likely qualify for the public service reduction after 5 years of NHS employment, maintaining your 5-year pathway to settlement. However, this is subject to consultation and not yet confirmed. For consultant grade doctors earning over £125,140, you could potentially settle in just 3 years through the income-based pathway. For private sector doctors, your pathway depends entirely on your income. High earners can settle quickly, but those earning under £50,270 face 10 years. For your dependents, the rules have changed dramatically. Spouses must now qualify independently based on their own circumstances. For healthcare workers in roles below degree level, particularly care workers, you face a possible 15-year baseline pathway. The government is clearly prioritizing high earners and public service workers while making the pathway longer and harder for everyone else. The Home Secretary states, for those who believe that migration is part of modern Britain's story and must continue to be, we must prove that migration still works for this country. That means that those who come here must contribute, play their part, and enrich our national life. This policy reflects that philosophy. Settlement must be earned through measurable economic and social contribution.
What should you do? My advice to everyone watching: first, respond to the consultation if these changes affect you. Your input matters. Second, start documenting everything now. Your earnings, your NHS employment, your tax records, your English language qualifications. You'll need evidence for everything. Third, if you're close to settlement under current rules, consider whether you should accelerate your application before rules change. Fourth, if you're a spouse dependent who's not working, consider finding employment to build your own pathway to settlement. Fifth, understand that settlement may no longer provide access to benefits. You may need to plan for citizenship. The UK immigration system is becoming more complex and more selective. The government is making it clear that permanent settlement is a privilege to be earned, not an automatic right after 5 years. For doctors, particularly those in the NHS, the impact may be less severe than for other migrant groups. But the uncertainty around transitional arrangements and the treatment of dependents is concerning. This consultation period is critical. The government is genuinely seeking views, and the final policy could be modified based on responses. Thank you for watching. I hope this has clarified what these proposals mean for you. Please share this with colleagues who might be affected, and most importantly, make your voice heard in the consultation. The deadline for consultation responses is February 12th, 2026. Don't miss this opportunity to influence policy that will affect your future in the UK. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.